3 days before my 29th birthday, I found myself driving up the long, winding gravel path that led to the Carrington estate. The invitation had seemed harmless enough, a simple family dinner before the big day, but the moment I stepped into the drawing room, something felt immediately off. My mother, Victoria, sat upright in her silk blouse, her posture stiff and deliberate. My father, Jonathan, had a leather folder in front of him, and my brother, Lucas, lounged in an armchair, exuding the air of someone waiting for a show to start. I barely had time to set my purse down before Jonathan slid the folder toward me. "Evelyn, we need you to sign this," he said, his voice smooth and practiced, the same tone he used in court. I opened the folder to find a contract thick enough to choke a shredder. The first page outlined a prenuptial-style agreement that would place my inheritance, my company, and any future earnings under strict family oversight. I blinked at him, incredulous. "This is a joke." Lucas chuckled, low and sharp. "It's not a joke, Carrington. It's simple. You sign, you stay. You don't, you walk out for good." My mother folded her hands elegantly, like a queen on her throne. "We've invested too much in this family's reputation to allow chaos. Think of this as a formality. Protection of family assets." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. Protection from me, from poor decisions. Jonathan added without hesitation, "You've always been impulsive." The words hit me like a slap. Years of quietly building something of my own, never asking for their help, came rushing back. And now, 3 days before my birthday, they were threatening to cut me out unless I surrendered every ounce of independence I had left. I pushed the folder back. "You expect me to sign this tonight?" "Yes," Victoria replied coolly. "We won't drag it out. If you're part of this family, you'll understand the necessity." I studied their faces, my parents Carrington, my brother Smug, and felt the ground shift beneath me. This wasn't about protection, it was about control. And in that instant, I realized they had no idea who they were trying to control. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor, and said simply, "I'll need time," walking out with the folder still on the table, their ultimatum lingering around me like smoke as I drove into the night. On the drive home, memories pressed in, heavy in my chest. This wasn't new, it was just the sharpest version of a pattern I had known my entire life. My parents had built everything on appearances. My mother, obsessed with luncheons, curated guest lists, and ensuring the Carrington name whispered in the right circles. My father, a lawyer who believed control was the purest form of love, raising Lucas and me to equate loyalty with obedience, belonging with silence. Lucas had always been the golden child, tantrums excused as spirit, failures blamed on others, desires met with cars, trips, and connections as if the world owed him. I was different. I preferred books over parties, questions over easy answers. My ideas and dreams for something beyond the family circle were met with polite dismissal. "You'll grow out of it," my mother would say, smiling tightly, her eyes already judging. My father's words were sharper. "Stop chasing fantasies, Evelyn. Leave the real work to us." The only one who never asked me to shrink was my grandfather. On the back porch, he listened to my wild plans, companies, inventions, ways of living that didn't depend on the Carrington name, chuckling and sipping coffee. "Don't let them put you in their box, Carrington. You're bigger than that." When he passed during my last year of college, I thought I had lost my only ally. Then his will was revealed quietly, secretly, leaving nearly everything to me, investments hidden from my parents, $6 million, and a note in his handwriting. "This is yours. Build what they can't control." That inheritance had been the seed of the company I now owned and the safety net that let me follow my own path. It was why I refused to let their ultimatum destroy everything I'd built. They still thought I was just the dreamer. Back in my apartment, I let the anger settle into something sharper. For years, I had carried the truth quietly, preferring discretion to spectacle. My grandfather's investments had grown steadily, and my own company, Carrington Tech, born from late nights and stubborn belief, had propelled me into a position most people only dream of. Together, they put my net worth just over $10 million, yet no one would guess it. I drove a modest sedan rather than a flashy car, lived in a modern but modest apartment, and wore professional clothes that didn't scream for attention, all choices that kept me grounded while I built a life that was truly my own. It wasn't humility driving me, it was strategy. The less anyone knew, the freer I was to move without the heavy weight of expectation, or worse, exploitation. I couldn't stop thinking about my parents' smug faces at the estate, convinced they were holding all the reins. They had no clue the horse had already bolted, and their arrogance thrived in the shadows, fed by the false notion that I needed them. Maybe, in some way, my silence had enabled it. I had left them no cracks, no reason to doubt the story they'd constructed about me as the dependent, impractical Carrington daughter. My hand lingered over the desk where my files were stacked, bank statements, contracts, valuations, all proof of the life I had built entirely on my own. I had wanted love without strings, a family without deals or signatures, yet they had turned my birthday into a transaction. For the first time, I questioned whether keeping my success a secret had been a mistake. Perhaps I had hoped my quiet achievements would eventually earn their respect. Instead, it rendered me invisible. I closed the folder and leaned back, realizing that if they wanted a battle over control and money, it was time they understood exactly who they were dealing with. The first Carrington I had to make was to Rachel, the one person who had always stood firmly in my corner. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright until she heard mine, and when I told her everything, the estate, the contract, the ultimatum, there was a pause, then her outrage poured through the line. "They're treating you like property," she snapped. "Not even pretending to hide it. Who does that to their own daughter?" I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of my window. "Apparently, mine does." "You can't let them corner you," she added, her certainty steadying me. "Not when you have the power to end it." I promised her I had a plan, though at that moment it was more conviction than detail. After hanging up, I Carrington-led Thomas Bennett, the only lawyer I trusted, the man who had handled my grandfather's estate and guided me through the early days of building Carrington Tech. Retired in name only, he remained sharp, formidable, and welcoming with the same grave kindness I remembered. I slid the thick contract across his desk, and he read silently, page by page, his mouth tightening with each turn. Finally, he set it down. "This isn't protection," he said flatly. "It's predatory. They want to bind you so tightly you'd need their permission to breathe." Relief washed over me. "Can we fight it?" I asked. He gave me a look that almost made me smile. "We won't just fight it. We'll rewrite the rules." Over the next 2 hours, we crafted a counter-agreement, balanced, precise, ironclad. It protected my company and intellectual property, shielded my investments, and set terms recognizing me as an equal, not an asset to be managed. When we finished, Thomas leaned back, tapping the new document. "This," he said, "is what real protection looks like." I gathered the papers, feeling their weight in my hands, and for the first time since the ultimatum, I felt prepared, not just angry. Walking home with Thomas's counter-agreement in my bag, memories pressed in with sharp edges. This wasn't merely about a contract, it was every moment that had brought me here, every subtle reminder that I had never been enough in their eyes. I remembered Victoria's voice at a dinner years ago, slicing through the clink of glasses. "Evelyn insists on building her little software company. Such ambition." The pause was deliberate, her polite smile disguising the message. Cute hobby, nothing more. Guests laughed softly, not at a joke, but at my silence. Then my father, when I Carrington-led to share my first round of funding, he listened briefly before saying, "That's good, but let's be realistic. You won't keep pace with the established firms. Stay practical Carrington." He never asked what the company did or why it mattered to me. And Lucas treated my success like an extension of the family wallet. "You'll cover my shortfall." "Right, it's all the same money," he said casually, as if my hard work existed only to cushion his failures. He never congratulated me. He never felt the need. One memory bled into the next, forming a pattern I could no longer ignore. They had never truly believed in me, never respected me. The prenup wasn't a sudden act of caution, it was the inevitable outcome of years spent treating me as someone to manage, not trust. I arrived at my apartment with hands trembling, though not from fear. Clarity coursed through me instead. The cracks in our family had always existed. I had just convinced myself they were surface scratches. Now, under the weight of their ultimatum, the fractures split wide open. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, knowing that the next time I faced them, I wouldn't be the same daughter they thought they could dismiss. 2 nights later, I returned to the estate, folder in hand but unopened. Victoria had Carrington led a final discussion, her tone dripping with magnanimity, as if I were being granted some gracious opportunity at redemption. When I stepped into the study, my father and Lucas were already seated, and Victoria arrived moments later, holding a glass of wine as though it were a carefully rehearsed prop in a play she'd performed 100 times. Their Carrington, confident smiles gave away their certainty. They had already decided how this would end. "Evelyn," Jonathan began, gesturing toward the leather chair across from him, "let's not make this harder than it needs to be. You've had time to think. I trust you see that this agreement is not just reasonable, but necessary." Lucas leaned back in his chair, a smirk laced with mockery. "Honestly, Carrington, just sign it. We all know you wouldn't last a year without family backing." Victoria added her quiet edge. "Loyalty is what keeps us together. You've benefited from the Carrington name your whole life. This is about protecting that legacy." I sat, folding my hands in my lap, letting their words wash over me. Once they would have stung, but now I only heard the rhythm of control, the language of people who couldn't fathom being challenged. "I see," I said evenly, giving nothing away. Across the room, Sophie sat near the window, perhaps invited to witness my capitulation. She didn't speak, but I caught the flicker of hesitation in her eyes, the tiniest crack in their united front, and I tucked it away like a card yet to be played. Jonathan slid the contract closer. "It's time to sign, Evelyn. We can't delay any longer." I placed my hand on the folder but didn't open it. Instead, I met each of their gazes in turn, long enough to unsettle them. "I'll consider everything you've said," I replied, Carrington, almost indifferent, letting them mistake composure for resignation. When I finally left the study, their smugness lingered, but so did my silence, a silence heavy with the plan I had yet to unveil. The dining room had been staged for celebration, china polished, silverware gleaming, wine poured before I even sat. My parents flanked the table like dignitaries at a summit. Lucas lounged at the end, smirking as if the matter were already settled. I waited until the first course was cleared before setting my leather folder on the table. "I've reviewed the agreement," I said evenly, "and I've prepared one of my own." Victoria's laugh was soft, almost pitying. "Darling, this isn't a negotiation. You're not in a position to dictate terms." Jonathan leaned back, indulgent. "We don't need revisions. Just a signature." I slid the counter-contract across the linen. "Read it. It's balanced. It protects everyone's interests." Lucas snorted. "Balanced? Don't waste our time. You don't have assets worth protecting." That's when I placed the second set of documents on top: bank statements, investment portfolios, company valuations. "Actually, I do. Roughly $10 million worth." The silence that followed was almost tangible. Jonathan froze mid-sip. Victoria's smile faltered, her mouth parting as if words had deserted her. Even Sophie, seated quietly, widened her eyes. Lucas broke first, face twisting in disbelief. 10 million. And you never said a word? You let us plan, you let us think. I didn't let you think anything, I interrupted Carringtonly. You assumed. And you dismissed me. Over and over, because you believed I had nothing. His voice rose, desperate now, no longer smooth. You were supposed to be the fallback I counted on. He stopped. Too late. The truth was already spilling out. I leaned back, watching cracks spread across their faces. For the first time, I wasn't the one cornered. The throne they thought held securely was shifting beneath them, and I intended to make sure it stayed that way. The air thickened after Lucas's outburst, but I didn't rush to fill it. I reached into my folder and handed Thomas Bennett the floor. Carrington and composed, as if anticipating this moment, he adjusted his glasses and opened the counter-contract. This agreement ensures equal protection for both parties. It preserves family assets, yes, but it also safeguards Mrs. Carrington's holdings, intellectual property, and independent business interests. It is comprehensive, balanced, and enforceable. Jonathan bristled. This isn't how our agreements work. Thomas didn't flinch. Then perhaps it's time your agreements evolved. The leverage you thought you had is no longer valid. Your daughter is not dependent. She is your equal. Jonathan's jaw worked silently, his expression revealing the dawning realization. Their position had collapsed, authority undermined by facts they couldn't ignore. Victoria leaned forward, her voice softening in an attempt to soothe, but it felt like another tactic. Carrington Lista, we're family. You don't need to prove yourself to us. These secrets, these documents, why make us adversaries? I held her gaze evenly. Because you turned yourselves into adversaries the moment you demanded obedience instead of trust. Family isn't control, it's respect. And until now, you've never given me that. Her composure faltered, the mask slipping just enough to reveal uncertainty. Across the table, Sophie cleared her throat quietly but firmly. She's right. Maybe it's time we started listening instead of assuming. Her words were small, but they cracked the wall my parents had built around themselves, a reminder that not every bond in this family was poisoned. I closed my folder, not with finality, but with certainty. The ground had shifted. I was no longer standing on the weaker side. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, I could see them losing their footing. In the days that followed, the Carrington family's atmosphere changed subtly but unmistakably. At gatherings, the way people addressed me shifted. Aunts and uncles who had once dismissed my work now asked careful, almost cautious questions about my company. Others, like Lucas, barely hid their resentment, their greetings clipped, their eyes sharp with unspoken accusations. Thomas moved methodi Carringtonly, filing paperwork that secured every door my parents might have tried to pry open. My assets were protected, my intellectual property shielded with ironclad legal fortifications. When he handed me the final documents, a rare smile breaking across his face, he said, "You're untouchable now." And for the first time, I felt it, the reality of my freedom. But liberation came with a quiet ache. Any lingering hope that my parents would one day see me for who I really was had vanished in that dining room. Respect forced by numbers on a page was no respect at all. I found myself revisiting childhood memories, searching for warmth that might never have existed, holding on to only my grandfather's steady, proud voice as a true anchor. His faith had been the seed of everything, the reason I had dared to build a life on my own. Walking out of Thomas's office, papers in hand, I felt lighter, but also unexpectedly alone. Blood tied me to the Carringtons, but love had been severed long before their ultimatum. My birthday arrived, and with it, the choice to celebrate on my own terms. My apartment was alive with laughter instead of judgment. Rachel had commandeered the kitchen, insisting on cooking, while Sophie arrived with flowers she had chosen herself, a quiet gesture of genuine thoughtfulness. Around the table sat people who had chosen to be there, friends who knew me for my ideas, my stubbornness, my victories and mistakes. There was no silver polished for appearances, no speeches about legacy, no undercurrent of competition, just warmth, the kind I had longed for in my family, but never received. Watching Rachel and Sophie joke across the table, I realized how rare it was to be surrounded by people who were there because they wanted to be, not because they expected to gain something. When the cake arrived, candles flickering, I didn't make a silent wish. Instead, a vow settled in my chest. I would never dim myself to make others comfortable. I would not bend to control disguised as loyalty. Blood may have tied me to the Carringtons, but loyalty, respect, and love defined the family I had chosen. Sitting there, surrounded by those who truly mattered, I felt complete. I blew out the candles with steady breath, not asking for change, but marking the life I had already claimed. My life was mine, unapologetic Carringtonly, and I would never hide my light again.